This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And Doc, as you know, one of our fine partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is The Athletic. And The Athletic Detroit is premium coverage for passionate, hugely passionate Detroit sports fans. And listeners of this very episode of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company can get 30% off the first year of an annual subscription to The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner and fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles McElroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, always enjoy your company. Had a chance, and we'll review it on this week's edition of Two Bad Hombres. DSP Appreciation Day at Jimmy John's Field was awesome. Thank you for coming. It was a fun experience to go out there to Utica, watch a great baseball game. West Side Woolly Mammoths and the Utica Unicorns, they put on a fun contest. Lots of home runs. It was a fun experience. I had a great time. And thank you and your family for coming. And now we get to record a podcast talking about the Detroit Tigers. I know that the week that just passed for the Tigers was not great. They lost a plethora of games. A signing that they had kind of didn't work out. And general manager Al Avila basically made a rookie mistake in terms of not knowing, that Jacob Turner could not be eligible to be brought back up after being DFA'd. I guess you had to wait a period of time, like 10 days.
10 days at least, yeah.
And that caused a situation in which the Tigers on Sunday had to basically play a bullpen game where Buck Farmer started.
Oh, don't we love Buck? How many years straight now have we talked about Buck and how we don't want to see him ever again? Then he has to start Sunday.
Exactly.
Good God,
but
right?
That was not a really good look for the Tigers organization to not know exactly the rules of how you ship down players and then bring them back up. And because of injuries, because of the way the schedule shook out, the Tigers had to scramble to put together a pitching rotation for Sunday. And luckily it worked out, but it was a disaster series versus the Twins. It was one in which the baseball quality from both squads wasn't that good.
Well, by the way, Nick Castellanos, a big shout out to him because of his 5-hit game, career high, 5-hit game last Monday. He was named the American League Player of the Week. But outside of him, no glorious performances out of anybody, pitching or hitting. And hitting has been despicable, hasn't it? And they lose a one-run game Sunday 5-4. They lost Sunday 5-4. 17-22 now in one-run games this season. They were 17-23 last season in one-run games. So eerily similar to last season, how they have fared thus far this season in one-run games, losing more than they have won, including on Sunday against the Twinkies. And the Twinkies have kind of gotten hot here, and the Tigers are still miserable. Twinkies have gotten hot at the wrong time for them. They're way out of the divisional race, and the Tigers just clearly stink. 5-12 in the month of August now, going into Tuesday's game at Comerica against the Chicago Cubs, who they have a 2-game set against. 0-2 already against the Cubs. They lost 2 at Wrigley earlier in the season. Now 2 at home at Comerica, and you got to believe, they're going to end up being 0-4, or at least 1-3 by the end of this 2-game set with the Cubs.
Do you think the Tigers have mailed it in, or you say, look, water found its level, the Tigers were not that good, the bullpen's not that effective, and you say, well, when you look at it collectively, this is what the Tigers team is? Or do you say, you know what, with the collection of injuries, with some struggles from the starting pitchers, that this is a team that is underperforming right now?
No, I would say they are what they are. They are who they are. They weren't going to be great. They were going to be a 20-20-plus game below 500 ball club in 2018. And they have proven that. And after trading Leonis Martin and Mike Fiers, guys that were producing for them in the first half of the season, they were going to go down the tubes even more than they already were. Then Nick Castellanos has a poor start to the second half. Other guys have tailed off since maybe having red starts, or good starts at least to the campaign, such as Jamer Candelario and others, guys that the Tigers really needed to contribute this season. Mikey Matuk has been a non-presence all year long. Right now they're being led by Jim Adduci, the Fighting Adducis. That's not a good thing for the Tigers, for a major league club, when you're being led offensively by Jim Adduci, a guy that's been a career minor leaguer. So the Tigers were going to tail off, and they have tailed off big time. And you know what? They're probably going to continue sinking deeply. They could lose 100 games. Now, do I think they're going to lose 100 games? I think more in the ballpark of 95, 96 games. They'll end up losing, so under 100. But yeah, they could lose 100. And guess what? The White Sox and Royals will, I think, easily lose 100 games this season. That is how bad the American League Central Division this year is. You're going to have three teams, Doc, that lose at least 95 games. I think Tigers lose 95, White Sox 95 plus, Royals 100 plus games. I think you're going to see the Royals lose. The Orioles in the American League East Division 100 plus games as well. So some miserable teams in the American League this season.
So with the Tigers losing, my bad, I could have swore that I read that they won that game, but
we were at Jimmy John's Field living it up, too, in the suite, so the Cabana suite.
Exactly. With them losing that game, how egregious is that error and that mistake by Al Avila? I mean, you tried, you threw a flyer out there to Zach McAllister, you put him out there. His fastball was effective, but he couldn't control it, and teams were just able to destroy the baseball, and he gave up runs after runs, and in his a couple outings, he just didn't look good, and so he gets DFA'd quick. I just kind of felt like Zach McAllister could have done a little bit better, but in the end, it just didn't work out here in Detroit. And then, obviously, Jacob Turner, I mean, that's not the best option to bring back up, but you couldn't even do it properly to, see what you got with them. I mean, by this point in time, most people just felt like, really? Jacob Turner's still on the roster? Why?
Well, Artie Lewicki, Jacob Turner, Buck Farmer. I mean, how much worse can it get? They should go into a bullpen by committee rotation where they have bullpen arms starting the game, pitching 2 innings every single game, not just Sunday as they did against the Twinkies. It should be on full display the rest of the way this season. Outside of Matthew Boyd, Matt Boyd, the lefty in the Tigers rotation, is the best arm by far right now, and he has a 4-something ERA, Doc. He hasn't even been extremely sharp in the second half. He's had his poor outings, yet he is the best, most reliable Tigers starting arm right now, and nobody truly is even close to him. Francisco Liriano, the 34-year-old lefty, a little bit of Vito's notebook early on in this week's edition of Tigers Talk. Francisco Liriano has a fielding independent pitching mark of 5.63 this season, his worst mark in his big league career for fielding independent pitching, which truly evaluates a starting arm, a pitcher in general, and how he has done up to a certain point in the season. So Francisco Liriano, an FIP above 5.5. He has been that miserable in 2018. He's a guy, well, that's been despicable, and really, you don't want starting every fifth day the rest of the way this season. Yet, they're so depleted as a rotation, Doc, that they have to feature arms such as Francisco Liriano in this 5-man rotation every fifth day, and it's not a good thing for the Tigers organization, and when you're a Tigers fan that maybe wants to see them win a couple of games at least here and there.
What's disappointing is that you don't want the general manager to be kind of going through the motions. You want them to be really functioning on all cylinders and things like that. But in the end, it's a mistake. We all make them. The Tigers, obviously, they had to, go with the bullpen. It was a close game. It was 4-4. And then Alex Wilson gave up the lead run, I believe.
He did. He blew it. And, he's been not steady Freddie. But you could also say that Wilson has been one of the most reliable bullpen arms this season. So even though he hasn't been a steady Freddie, who else do they have? Once again, it goes back to that. Now, you can name, at least right now, Victor Alcantara. Remember, he was the throw-in in that Cameron Maybin trade with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. He has worked out tremendously this season. Last year had a rough stretch of games. He didn't look like he was major league quality. This year, though, using another number and stat for my 5 numbers you need to know about the Detroit Tigers this week, you can look at Alcantara and his stats and what he's done in his last 11 innings. His last 11 innings, he's allowed 0 runs, Doc, and has struck out 11 batters while walking only 2. So he's been extremely sharp, a pleasant surprise for the Detroit Tigers bullpen this season.
Major news broke. I mean, it wasn't really breaking news. I mean, you and I both knew just based on performance what was going to happen. But Victor Martinez, after a contest, just came out and discussed with the media kind of in-depthly talking about his future and things like that. And he basically made it official that he's going to retire at the end of the season. And he said he's going to look forward to the 6 weeks that he's going to stay with the club and he's going to ride it out. Manager Ron Gardenhire has afforded him the opportunity to, maintain a spot in that lineup. He's not going to be pulled. And he has been hitting a little bit, not enough to bring up his numbers to respectability, but in the last, 24 games, he has been a little bit more productive than before. But how did you respond to the news that Victor Martinez is going to officially retire at the end of the 2018 baseball season?
It's finally over.
No love?
Well, I'll miss what he used to do back in 2014 and before that, but really since, he's been a shell of his old self. So we wanted to see him retire for a long time. And luckily, it looks like he will be retiring at season's end at the not tender age, but age of 39, your age as well. An age in which a major leaguer should be hanging it up. And really, he should have hung it up 2 years ago, probably at least. And he's just a shell of his old self. Now, luckily, he has shown a little bit here and there, a glimpse of some brilliance at the plate. But consistently over the course of this season as a whole, he hasn't been the same Victor Martinez. But we should have expected that out of Victor Martinez this year, too, to be a shell of his old self, because he was last year truly as well.
When we look at these deals that are made, obviously people recognize that Mike Ilitch wanted him here. Maybe the front office would not have gave him that many years, especially a year like this where he's making $18 million at the age of 39. But at the tail end of these contracts where, they're making big money at 39 years old, you realize, okay, you're not going to get as much production. But early on, his tenure with the Tigers was effective. He was a solid hitter, a guy that brought a solid bat to that lineup. He was productive in the postseasons in which he was available. And it was interesting to read in the paper, Vito, that the 2012 run to the World Series, was Victor Martinez present? No, unfortunately, when they got to the World Series and lost to the Giants, that was the year he had that freaky offseason injury when he worked out and suffered a major injury, and he was out for the year. So he never made it to the World Series, was involved in several playoff series, but was effective when he was involved in the playoffs, but unfortunately never got a chance to play in the World Series. Will end his career without that elusive World Series title. But would you say that his tenure in Detroit overall, even though you could say maybe the last couple years he wasn't as productive, but his leadership, the ability to kind of connect to the players, the foreign players that are on the Detroit Tigers roster, would you say in totality, would you rate his tenure with the Detroit Tigers as being favorable?
I would say a B, a solid B. He hit .335 in 2014. Got to remember that. OPS of .974. Was runner-up for American League MVP. So in 2014, he had a hell of a season. So really, overall-wise, even in 2013, when he came back after that 2012 season in which he couldn't play, came back from injury, was productive in 2013 and 2014. So V-Mart got it done for the Detroit Tigers. In 2011, his first campaign in Detroit as well, got it done at the plate. So I would say V-Mart, overall-wise, deserves a B for his Tigers tenure. And he helped the Tigers hitters, helped mold them into better all-around major league hitters, such as JD Martinez, who now is producing for the Boston Red Sox. So they're benefiting from V-Mart's tutelage. Boston is with JD Martinez right now. The Tigers did. JD was great with the Tigers. Tigers got nothing in return for him, with the D-backs in that trade. Well, Lugo, what is he going to do now moving forward? But enough of that sour grapes. Overall-wise, back to your question, yeah, I would say he was productive, and Tigers fans should appreciate what he did in a Tigers uni.
And how would you rate how the Tigers handled it? Because you and I think, are a little bit more ruthless in that once he started to struggle at the beginning of the season, I would have maybe said, look, sit down. But the Tigers gave him a bunch of respect. They honored, the fact that he was a productive member of the team, and they paid him, and he played. And so do you feel like maybe that the Tigers could have, respectfully sat him down, or would that have caused a major ripple effect, a negative one throughout that clubhouse? Because I would say that a younger player could have gotten a year experience, don't you think? Obviously he played DH, but anytime he hit the ball that you and I could consider a double, it would be a single, and he's so slow. He's markedly slower than, even 5 years ago. And obviously, he's been moved around the lineup, but do you feel like that the Tigers, maybe just placated to a guy that was a veteran and maybe could have put someone else in the DH spot and allowed for a little bit more productivity? Would it matter if they got like 10 more wins, or do you say, you know what, in a season where nothing is really expected other than some development and a bunch of losses, it's okay to let a veteran in this circumstance that we just saw in 2018, it's okay to let a guy just basically have a charity spot in the lineup? It just bums me out because I know he's making $18 million and it's hard. I can't even pay you a couple $100 without trying to get some value, without trying to get my value back. But $18 million, I know it's easy for fans to say, just sit him, just let him go. But I just don't like a player being given a charity spot in a lineup when you only got 9 players. You got a charity spot.
Well, you know what? Batting them in the cleanup spot, too, as they were for much of the regular season in the first half at least, it was almost like tanking by default. Tigers weren't trying to tank, but when you're batting him in that cleanup spot as the everyday DH, well, you were kind of tanking because he's a guy that was hitting with an OPS below 600 at one point. Now it's above 600 because of some recent success. But overall-wise this year, man, when you were batting him in that cleanup spot, batting him there, you were tanking by default. You maybe weren't trying to want to come out and say you were tanking, but you were. Now, so I would see why, hey, if you want to lose a lot of games, well, you were going to bat him in that spot. So I can see why they actually kept giving him ABs. And then who are the other options? We want younger options to come onto the scene and perform for the Tigers and to get their looks, right? So we can find out what they're made of at the major league level. But like Kristen Stewart might have been the only guy you could have maybe given some ABs at in that DH spot. And guess what he's done in recent memory? Has kind of tailed off with his production. Hasn't been a great, successful guy at the plate all season long. So when that's the case, who else are you going to turn to? Besides for spelling V-Mart with some guys already on the major league roster here and there. Like Miguel Cabrera would have been, I think, using that role in the second half if he was still healthy right now. And I think he's a guy that should definitely be the DH starting next season. But yeah, I can see why they actually gave V-Mart those at-bats in the DH spot. And if I was V-Mart, I wouldn't have needed Ron Gardenhire to tell me to go sit down. I would have been right now, waving my hand around and saying, I want to sit down. I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to continue embarrassing myself in my swan song.
That's all it takes, Vito. It's just with V-Mart, it's one of those interesting dynamics in which he was a popular player in that clubhouse, a guy that took on a leadership role, but in the end, his productivity. And that's what's most important is your productivity. It tailed off, but it has partly contributed to the Tigers' struggles. But in the end, you were absolutely right. This was a season that was just going to be for development and things like that. Before our first break, are you impressed with Cameron making his way through AA into AAA now? He was called up. He's making some noise. This Cameron character, we talked about him earlier in the season. This is an individual that comes from baseball lineage. I think his dad was a Major League Baseball player.
Mike Cameron, longtime center fielder and outfielder for the Red Sox, Mariners, Reds, I believe, other teams too.
And he's had a very solid 2018 season. He's making some noise. Are you keeping track?
Well, he's been really performing. Now, also Isaac Paredes. Those two guys, position players in the farm system of the Tigers, have been performing throughout the course of this season on a consistent basis. So you want to see that being continued by Paredes, by Cameron. And if they do continue that, I think you'll be able to see those guys at the major league level starting next season. Now, I don't know about a September call-up when it becomes a 40-man roster. I don't know if those guys will be added to the roster when rosters do expand in September. But for sure, I would have to believe by the time of opening day in 2019, at least one of those two, I think one of those two will be contending for a roster spot. And then come mid-season of 2019, I think you could expect to see both guys up at the major league level. Because guess what? 2018 will be much like 2019. Very similar campaigns in the fact that the Tigers will be losing a lot more than they'll be winning on a regular basis.
All right, Vito, what's ahead in the second half of the podcast?
We'll have to take a look at the Cubs series a little bit and some other news and notes from Vito's notebook this week.
All right, stay with us. You're listening to Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.
Football fans, the 14th Annual Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic returns to Wayne State University August 23rd through 25th. The Midwest Premier High School Football Showcase will be highlighted by 7 must-see games featuring the region's top players and teams. For more information and to purchase your tickets online, visit DetroitSports.org. Powered by Zenith, the Detroit-based protective equipment design company, Meyer, and Performance Orthopedics. The Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic. The season starts here.
And I know, Vito, you're looking forward to the Prep Kickoff Classic. You'll do great work there. Definitely follow Vito at Vito Jerome. We always want to thank our sponsors, and especially one of our great sponsors, the Detroit Sports Commission, and definitely support those who support us. Check out the Prep Kickoff Classic, and Vito will be doing great work over there. Great high school football action. Thanks again to our fine sponsor, the Detroit Sports Commission.
I look forward to it. 7 games, must-see matchups, 14 teams featured all weekend long, Thursday through Saturday at Tom Adams Field on the campus of Wayne State University.
Nice, Vito. All right. You hopefully have an opportunity to cover Alan Trammell's baseball jersey retirement game. It's going to take place this Sunday versus the White Sox. I hope you are able to do it. Obviously, we get word the day before or the day of if you're going to go. What would your goal be for that outing if you do get a chance to cover it as credentialed media?
Well, Tigers beating the White Sox on Sunday. That'd be nice to rub it in my brother's face because he'll be there as well, attending to watch Alan Trammell's jersey retirement ceremony. His number 3 being retired approximately 12:15. I guess when they retired Jack Morris's number 47, it was later than 12:15. I didn't get the chance to see it live. It happened more like at 12:30. So we have 4 tickets with my family. But then, like you said, I might be able to cover it as well. Be on the field before the game, maybe get some sound bites and be in the press box during the game, maybe even leave a little bit earlier before the game ends to go see my family and hang out with them the rest of the game. But that's my plan for Sunday, hoping to cover it. And you know what? We don't know. We're just not sure yet, but we hope that I will get the chance to cover that game on Sunday against the White Sox for the Tigers.
But it's safe to assume that more people will be excited for Alan Trammell. I think his connection to the city a little bit deeper. Not maybe a lot, but a little bit deeper than Jack Morris. I think a lot of fans are definitely excited to go out Sunday. And hopefully it's nice weather and you have that opportunity to go cover it and get some audio and just experience it. Because, covering the Detroit Tigers has been very rewarding. We're getting a lot of insight, learning a lot as well. So I definitely hope you have that opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Doc, for saying all of that. And you know what? Trammell formed that longest double play tandem in Major League Baseball history with Sweet Lou Whitaker. Whitaker at second, Trammell at shortstop. So you had that long-standing double play tandem from 77 to 95. Whitaker's last season was in 95. Trammell was only a Tiger his whole entire career, from 77 to 1996. Trammell and Whitaker came up together. Jack Morris around that time as well. All these legendary Tigers and faces of the 84 championship team were guys that came up together. Homegrown ball players for the Tigers, and we would love to see some homegrown ball players for the Tigers with this current roster, wouldn't we? And moving forward as well. And how many guys do we have to trust upon moving forward? I don't know, because a lot of guys haven't performed at a hugely consistent or consistently successful level throughout the course of this season. In the minors, at the majors, even the Tigers' lone all-star representative this year, and Joe Jimenez, has fallen off the cliff, really, in the second half. Have you seen his ERA, his earned run average? It's been 8. I mean, God, not good.
Oof.
An ERA of 8 in the second half.
Do you think they used him properly this year? When you assess how the Tigers have utilized Joe Jimenez, he's pitched more than he's pitched ever before. And do you think that they just have to ride it out and allow him to see what he's got left in the tank? Or do you say, you know what, you might have to limit him in September to avoid maybe injury or hurting his confidence if his numbers continue to dip?
Well, I would say maybe you play it a little bit more conservatively and safely with him the rest of the way this season, because he is still young. He's only, 23 years old? I mean, he's a young guy, so you don't want to force things with them, too, and put too many innings on his arm, because you don't want to ruin him for the future. It's about the future, the long-term future of Joe Jimenez. A guy like that who is key to the Tigers' development and success of the ball club in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. So if you want to see the Tigers be a winning ball club, you have to believe that Joe Jimenez will be a part of that team 3 to 5 years from now when they become relevant again. So you want to see him be healthy and successful then as well, and even more successful than now. And he was great in the first half. I mean, you look at his numbers in the first half. He allowed 13 earned runs and posted an ERA of 2.72 in 46 games in 43 innings. But in the second half, thus far, once again, it is worth bringing up as part of Vito's notebook this week. He has allowed 8 runs, recorded an ERA of 8 in 10 games and 9 innings pitched. And he's already walked 5 batters and allowed 3 home runs. He allowed 2. All of those innings pitched in the first half, many more innings he pitched in the first half, allowed only 2, has already allowed 3 long balls in his post-All-Star break appearances this season. Not a good sign from Joe Jimenez.
Yeah, I saw your article there at the Free Press, the 5 numbers article, and it was like, oh, Joe Jimenez is a guy that we all are counting on as maybe being the next closer. But you have to give credit to Shane Greene. I mean, his effectiveness this season has been worthwhile. He looks like he's rebounded from some confidence issues, has been a little bit more consistent, has done some things to at least help the ball club. And I would fairly say he's had a decent 2018 season.
He has, but he hasn't been dominant either. I mean, I could find a negative in every single thing with the Tigers this year, including with Shane Greene, who's been good in stretches, but consistently dominant as a Tigers closer? No, you can't say that about Shane Greene this year.
Dominant consistently meaning that every time he goes out there, it's guaranteed that he gets the 3 outs. No, he's been knocked around a little bit,
yes,
blown some saves. But by and large, wouldn't you say that he's done a good job from what you've observed? I think he's done a good job.
Well, compared to the Tigers' bullpen, the rest of the bullpen arms and, his bullpen counterparts, let's say, yeah, he's achieved a lot more than they have this season. But look at what he's, had to compete with in the bullpen. Not many other great options in the Tigers' bullpen consistently this season outside of Joe Jimenez, the Tigers' best bullpen arm, best player overall-wise, at least in the first half, and then Nick C. Castellanos right there, probably actually him number 1, Joe Jimenez number 2. Shane Greene in the pecking order would be what? Top 5 maybe? I would say top 5 to 7 range for the Tigers, and the players that have done the best this season, I think Shane Greene warrants consideration for being in the top 7 best Tigers players this season, something of that sort. But with his talent and the role that he's had this season and what I think he was expected to do this season, I think he should be in the top 5. should have been one of the top 3, let's say, most consistently successful players for the Tigers this season. And you really can't say that about Shane Greene and what he's done up to this point in the season.
And one thing, though, he started a podcast with Nick C., and I think they tailed off.
What happened? What happens? I haven't heard anything since.
I think they did 2 or 3, and it got canceled. I don't know
Well,
what
maybe
happened.
because they noticed it started sucking after that. Nick C. and him both. Nick C. had the great week this past week. The big game, 5-hit game, 2 home runs, 10 RBIs last week, from Monday through Sunday, and a .393 batting average in his last 7 games now overall, leading into Tuesday's contest, Tuesday night at Comerica against the Chi-Town Cubbies, who look like, could they be World Series bound once again? After only winning, once in 108 years. Could they win another World Series championship in 2018, Doc? Think about that.
Ooh. Vito, the NL is strong, just like the AL. I don't know. It's tough to pick the Cubs. I like what I see across the NL, but have you been picking into the Braves? I've been definitely watching what they've been doing. The Phillies, I don't know if they're going to make the postseason, but the National League is strong. Would I expect the Cubs to come out of there? I think they're going to be competitive. I like what they're doing. I like the team that they have, but would I think that they're one of the favorites? No, not right now, but I'm definitely excited to go see what they're going to bring to the table versus the Tigers.
You'll be there covering it maybe Tuesday and Wednesday, at least Tuesday night, right? So the night of this recording for the Braves, you brought up the Braves, a young team, good, fun to watch. Ronald Acuna, how about Junior? How great he's been, all those home runs and consecutive games, leadoff home runs as well for a rookie, a young dude. I mean, he's been great to watch with those Bravos of Atlanta.
I'm glad you brought up Acuna. Interesting story that came out with the Marlins, plunking him. I mean, he was jacking home runs game after game. I believe that he had hit home runs in like 3 to 4 consecutive games, and he was on the verge of making some noise, making some history. And what had happened? Atlanta's facing the Marlins, and the very first pitch of the contest, they plunk him. And everybody's all up in arms in baseball. They're talking about it. How cheap were the Marlins for doing that, for going after a guy like that, especially with the first pitch of the game, and Acuna got hurt. Now, many people were against it. They said, look, these unwritten rules of baseball are stupid. This was something that was Bush League. I can't believe the Marlins that were led by Derek Jeter would actually go out and actually do this. So a lot of people were against it. But my opinion, Vito, I'm all for it.
He had it coming, really? But you're harming a guy that's been successful. Really, you're jealous and envious of him because your team sucks and you've been sucking it up and you throw the fastest pitch you've thrown all season, I think, against him in that first pitch you throw in the game against Acuna. That's douchebag-ish, okay? And that's Bush League.
And that's been the prevailing argument. And obviously, I understand that side of it. I understand that potentially if you throw at somebody, you could eventually kill somebody.
Well, it just hurt them. Ruin this guy's career, hurt his wrist or something. He might never be the same hitter again.
Maybe not throwing at his wrist, maybe at his back, but in the end, competitively, you now are in his head a little bit. When you walk into a baseball game or a basketball court or, an NFL field or a poker table or podcasting, you try to be the best at what you can do. And if there's something that you could do to hurt your opponent, I'm all for it. And I'm not against the Marlins for trying to do it. Now, obviously throwing at his wrist is a little bit dangerous, but I would send a message to a player. I wouldn't be opposed to it if I was a manager. Major League Baseball didn't even punish him all that much. They only gave him a 5-game suspension, which equates to 1 missed start. I feel if baseball wanted to actually eliminate this from the landscape of Major League Baseball, they should have gave him a 40-game suspension. But for me, I like it. It's competitive. I feel like, hey, if you're going to go out there and compete, you play to win the game. And if eliminating a player is one avenue of trying to do it, look, in football, you hear it all the time. It's a little bit unspoken. People don't talk about it a whole heck of a lot. But what happens in these scrums after a running play? You got guys poking each other in the eye.
Oh, yeah, on the bottom of the pile, right?
And there were players that played for the Detroit Lions, a la Ndamukong Suh, who would step on people, who would take that extra edge. There are players, there always will be players that are ultra competitive, and I'm not against it. Now, obviously, I would not have wanted him to get hurt. I wouldn't have thrown it in his wrist, but I would have sent a message, plunk him right in the ass, right in the back.
In that ass, that big fat ass.
All for it, man. It's look, when you play big-time sports, it's going to happen, and I felt like the Braves did not retaliate as strongly as they should. They should have definitely been throwing right back at one of the players of the Marlins. Go ahead, retaliate. Or right then and there, they did scrum a little bit. Right then and there, throw down. The manager should have been throwing down. The whole team should have been like, okay, you want to throw at our guy? Let's go. It's time for it's ass-kicking time. But in the end, it didn't happen that way. What's going on with Acuna? Has he been back since?
Well, he's bounced back. He's been all right, luckily, because it looked like he was banged up, and you never know what could happen to the guy when he comes close to his wrist, hits around that area, could hurt the guy the rest of this season, his career, might never fully recover. And then you ruin this young guy's career when he had a budding career, budding stardom, on the rise for stardom maybe. And then you ruin it all in one stupid pitch you throw at the guy when it's not warranted, and you throw it at him because you're envious of what he's done at the plate in recent memory, and because you suck. Really, because you suck, you're envious and you throw it at him. Because your team and you individually have sucked all year long, doesn't give you the right to throw at that guy. And then because you can hurt him. I always fear hurting the guy, and especially a young guy on the rise who's going to more than likely eventually be a star in this league too.
All right, how do the Cubs match up against the Tigers? Do you think they can get a split? Do you think that the Cubs are going to come in here and start destroying Tigers pitching?
Let's just say this. The Cubs are 71-52, the best team in the National League. The Tigers are one of the worst teams in the American League. How are they going to fare? You would think the Tigers would get one game. Maybe the Tigers get one. And they're lucky of this 2-game set at Comerica.
Who's pitching for the Detroit Tigers these 2 games?
Jordan Zimmerman in the first game, and then you have Francisco Liriano, the guy that I just made fun of.
Oh, Vito,
just
come
killed.
on.
Pitching against John Lester on Wednesday. So Jay Zim is due to bounce back, I guess. And maybe they get one Tuesday night against Kyle Hendricks of the Cubbies, who hasn't been great for the Cubs this year. But John Lester's been really good this year. He's a veteran arm. Better than Liriano at this stage in their respective careers.
He struggled in recent outings.
Couple of outings, I think. But overall-wise this season, all-star-esque. And he is their best starting pitcher. He is their ace arm in that rotation. Yu Darvish has been miserable. Kyle Hendricks hasn't totally lived up to the bill in 2018, thus far at least. So Lester is their man, their go-to arm when postseason comes. And you would think he gets it done against, of all guys, Francisco Liriano. I mean, I think you and I almost could outduel Francisco Liriano at this point. And the Cubs will just out-hit the Tigers. And the Tigers start hitting Lester by some odd way, I got to believe the Cubs are going to out-hit the Tigers, though, and score more runs off of Liriano than the Tigers will off of John Lester. And the Cubs' bullpen isn't extremely strong. It isn't a huge strength for the Cubs. So maybe if you get past Lester, the Tigers can win that game Wednesday. But I got to say, at best, the Tigers get 1 out of 2. I mean, just based on paper alone and on records, but also based on these 2 matchups in these 2 games.
Some breaking news as we're recording this podcast. Reportedly, the Cubs are going to acquire Daniel Murphy from the Washington Nationals.
Big move. The Nats are then really foregoing 2018 and saying, we're not going to make the playoffs.
What does Daniel Murphy bring to the table?
A big bat, home run power for the Cubs. And you know what? It's always good to have a power bat to go down the stretch with, right? Can maybe get hot, carry your offense. And they got other bats already. Javi Baez might win the NL MVP, good with the glove, up the middle, can make all the plays, has some pop in his bat, definitely too. Chris Bryant has pop, Anthony Rizzo has pop. Daniel Murphy, just another powerful bat for that Cubs order. And another reason why you can say the Cubs maybe have it in them to win another World Series championship, and they're second. The Cubs could win 2 titles in 3 years after winning in 2016.
If not the Cubs, who are also strong contenders in the National League?
Well, I can say this much. It's not going to be the Nats this year. They're not going to even make the playoffs. Hugely disappointing. They fired Dusty Baker, get Dave Martinez. They haven't done any better. They've been much worse after winning 90-plus games the past 2 campaigns. Now, other teams that could win it all, the D-backs and the Dodgers in the NL West. I could see those 2 teams. Braves and Phillies, I believe, are too young right now, and their rotations, especially the Braves, I don't think is good enough, and the Phillies rotation probably isn't good enough either. Now, the Dodgers were there last year, so to get back to the World Series, you could say the Astros have had a World Series hangover. The A's and Astros in the American League West Division are tied up for the divisional lead. And really, you look at the AL, not to totally change the conversation here, but you look at the American League West, what the A's have done this year to be a contender out there, be potentially a first-place team to win the division. You got to look at their roster. On paper alone, the A's roster wasn't any better than the Twins coming into the season. So if you're a Twins fan, you got to cry at night every single time you look at the A's and what they've done this year and being tied for first place with the Houston Astros, the team that won it all last year. But back to the NL, the Dodgers, I think, outside of the Cubs, are the favorite to get to the World Series, which would be 2 straight fall classics for the Dodgers. And you would hope with Kershaw, the rest of that talented roster, the Dodgers would get it done then if they made it back for a 2nd straight season.
Before we get out of here, as our time is coming to an end, anything else that's caught your attention in the world of Major League Baseball or the Detroit Tigers?
Well, the Urena and Acuna incident that you already brought up, and I just thought it was Bush League. And then Keith Hernandez was talking about this. Mets broadcaster, longtime, Mets player, big name guy, has done some FS1 studio analysis and stuff for the postseason coverage for FS1. He was saying that he sees why Urena threw at Ronald Acuna. was kind of giving attention to it and reason for people to throw at that batter when that batter's doing well. As you were saying, I guess you were advocating as well, and you were of the same wavelength as Keith Hernandez. For me, like I said, I just see no rhyme or reason for that to happen ever in Major League Baseball.
Well, the week ahead for the Tigers might start off tough, 2 games versus the Cubs, but I do think they have a chance to play well versus the White Sox, a team that obviously is struggling, and the Detroit Tigers have played well at Comerica Park. And like you said, a sign of a team that's inconsistent, that's not that good, is a team that can't play away from Comerica Park. They've played around 500 baseball at home, and they've been well under 500 on the road. So it gives good sign. It gives you hope that, look, in the end, when you evaluate it, a lot of talent is going to have to be overhauled, and now we get a chance to start evaluating overall what some of the players that Al Avila has brought to the organization will look like. And in September, when the call-ups happen, it'll be interesting to see who comes up and who has a good September for the Detroit Tigers as they play it out.
Remember, over 500 at home, over 500 against the White Sox, too. So you would think they can win at least 2 out of 4. I'm going to say they win 3 out of 4 against the White Sox, with it being Trammell's jersey retirement day on Sunday. They get a W there. They win 2 other games in that series and win the series, winning 3 out of 4 against the Chicago White Sox, who have been even more miserable. Now, isn't that hard to say that somebody's been more miserable than the Tigers when we've seen the Tigers up close and personal now how many times as fans, as media members? But there has been, 2 teams, like I said, and the White Sox are one of them, and that's why I think, hey, Tigers should win 3 out of 4 at home against the Chi Sox this weekend.
You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. If you disagree with anything that you heard on this podcast or any other podcast, feel free to message and follow at Detroit Podcast, Detroit's most interactive sports Twitter page. We greatly appreciate all the support. We'll see everybody next time.
Thank you, guys. Adios.